Dinobot, a soldier cast out from the Predacons, not out of weakness, but because his code refused to serve a madman. What does it mean to be a warrior in a war that defies reason? Not for conquest, not for glory, but for something far more elusive: honor. In the ravaged future of Beast Wars, where the line between beast and machine was already blurred, one name stood apart, not for his power, but for his principles. Dinobot, a warrior who turned his back on Megatron's ambitions and chose a different path, not out of loyalty to the Maximal, but because his code of honor demanded something more. His ideals made him a traitor, his code made him a hero, and his death made him a legend. To some, he was just a Predacon who changed sides. To others, he was the soul of the war. But the question remains, can a warrior survive in a world that no longer believes in honor? Or is he doomed to fall by the very blade he refuses to abandon? This is Disassembled, Heroes and Villains. And today, we take a look at one of the most honorable characters in Transformers history, Beast Wars Dinobot. And by the end of this journey, I think you'll walk away with a question worth carrying through your day. Before he was a hero, before he was a traitor, Dinobot was something far simpler. A soldier, not born for diplomacy, not built for mercy. He was a weapon, sharpened by war and guided by a single blade of certainty. Strength must serve purpose. Victory must serve honor. Among the Predacons, this philosophy made him dangerous, not because he was the strongest, but because he believed. Where others followed Megatron for power, Dinobot followed him for destiny. Megatron had stolen something forbidden, Earth's golden disc, a relic of humanity's Voyager probe. He claimed it held a secret message from the original Megatron, a prophecy to ensure Decepticon dominance, rewriting history before the Beast Wars had ever begun. It was prophecy. It was power, and Megatron intended to use it to rewrite history. Dinobot was no fool. He knew the stakes. If the legends were true, this wasn't just about conquest. It was about reshaping the future of the Transformers race. But even then, cracks had begun to form. Megatron's ambitions didn't match Dinobot's ideals. He lied. He kept secrets. He twisted the prophecy to serve his own elevation, not the glory of the Predacons. For Dinobot, who lived by an internal code older than faction or creed, it felt like the first betrayal. And so, the seeds of rebellion were planted before the fateful crash on Earth, the moment their ship, the Dark Side, hurtled through time and smashed into prehistoric Earth. The Beast Wars began. But for Dinobot, the true war had already started, not between Predacons and Maximals, but between honor and ambition. When Megatron survived the crash and took command, Dinobot did the unthinkable. He challenged him. Not out of vengeance, not even out of pride, but because leadership must be earned. Megatron's vision was that of a charismatic madman. Dinobot saw it, and he stood alone to oppose it. Their battle was short, brutal, and in the end, Dinobot lost. Exiled, cast out by his own faction, humiliated, but unbroken. In most stories, this would be the end of a warrior's tale. Exiled, defeated, forgotten. But Dinobot, he chose another path. Instead of retreating into bitterness or crawling back in shame, he walked directly into the heart of his enemy's camp, the Maximals, Autobot descendants. He stood before Optimus Primal and made his intentions clear. I wish to join you, but not as a spy, not as a convert. He challenged Optimus Primal in open combat, demanding honor be met with honor. His duel with Optimus Primal was fierce, savage, and when the final blow could be struck, Dinobot hesitated. He understood that a clean victory would be the only way to ensure him as an honorable leader, and so, he aided Primal to his feet, continuing the battle until a Predacon attack. Joining the Maximals against his former allies, he showed the true strength of his character. He didn't bow to the Maximals, he aligned with them, temporarily, tactfully, out of necessity, and yet, something changed. Among the Maximals, Dinobot found conflict, but not in battle, in purpose. Rattrap hated him. Cheetor mistrusted him. Rhinox observed him with quiet caution. He was never truly welcomed, but he wasn't rejected either. And in that uneasy middle ground, he began to change. In Optimus Primal, he didn't treat Dinobot as a tool. He treated him as a peer rather than a pawn. Dinobot had been forged in the Predacon ranks, where strength was measured by the domination you could inflict, and loyalty was obedience. But here, leadership was something else entirely. It was earned through principle, not fear. Still, he remained apart, watching, measuring. His internal code, embodying the thoughts of a samurai and philosopher, clashed with everything around him. The Maximals valued peace. The Predacons craved power. Dinobot valued truth. That truth came back to haunt him when he discovered the golden disc still existed, Megatron still pursued it, and the power to rewrite the future remained in play. He remembered what was on the disc, what it predicted, the destruction of an entire timeline, the triumph of tyranny, the extinction of potential. And Dinobot, the solitary, unwanted warrior, began to feel the crushing weight of something new, responsibility. If Megatron succeeded, if the future was changed, then everything that followed, Autobots, Decepticons, peace, war, freedom, would never happen. Cybertron would fall before it ever rose, and Dinobot couldn't allow that. But he couldn't act without proof. He couldn't move without certainty. So he waited. He fought. He protected the Maximals, even as he kept his distance. Was he still a Predacon? Never fully. Was he a Maximal? Not truly. He meditated with Rhinox but kept one optic on Megatron. He joked with Rat Trap, only to recoil when the camaraderie became real. He didn't belong, but he mattered. And in a war where every faction was compromised by politics or power, Dinobot clung to the only thing that he never wavered, his code. He was something else entirely. A warrior without a nation. A soldier without a war he could believe in. Yet still, he stood guard. If no one else could uphold honor in the Beast Wars, then he would. He was no longer a Predacon, not yet a Maximal, but the war wouldn't wait for him to find himself. As Dinobot stood guard between two futures, the Beast Wars raged on, pulling him deeper into a conflict he could never ignore nor fully trust. And from the shadows, a darker reflection of himself was beginning to rise. As Dinobot stood between two factions, wrestling with loyalty and doubt, the war around him didn't pause. The Beast Wars surged on, and with each skirmish, Dinobot's place among the Maximals solidified, not as a friend, but as a necessity, a blade that cuts both ways. He wasn't trusted, not fully. Rat Trap mocked him openly. Cheetor watched him with youthful suspicion. Even Rhinox, the Maximal's most grounded presence, approached him with careful wisdom. But Dinobot earned his place, not through camaraderie, but through conviction. Time and again, he proved himself on the battlefield. When the Maximals were ambushed in Call of the Wild, it was Dinobot's tactical mind that helped them adapt to their beast modes and counterattack. In the probe, when hope of returning to Cybertron flickered, Dinobot did not lose focus. He fought to protect the transmitter, not for his own return, but for the Maximal's future. He wasn't motivated by faction. He was motivated by truth, and it was this search for truth that made him dangerous to both sides. The other Predacons saw it too. Megatron understood Dinobot's moral calculus and feared it, because it couldn't be manipulated. So, in Double Dinobot, he tried something new. He created a weapon that looked exactly like Dinobot, Clone 1. This copy was not a spiritual twin, but a soulless doppelganger, controlled by Megatron, devoid of honor, and driven by deception. Its purpose was to frame Dinobot, to erode trust within the Maximals, and it nearly succeeded. The clone infiltrated their ranks, caused chaos, and set off a chain of sabotage within the Axelon itself. But Dinobot, ever the tactician, sensed something was wrong. He confronted his imposter, and in a brutal clash of metal and principle, defeated it. Clone 1 was destroyed, not in a fire, as legend might exaggerate, but by electrical overload and submersion in the river below, where it short-circuited and was lost. But something lingered. The moment left more than battle damage. It left Dinobot shaken, because Clone 1 wasn't just a tool of sabotage. It was a reflection of what Dinobot could have become, what he might still become if his code ever faltered. A weapon without conscience, a soldier without soul. He didn't speak of it. From the day on, something hardened in him. A deeper vigilance, a renewed scrutiny of Megatron's plans. Yet, Megatron was not the only threat. In other voices, the war escalated beyond Predacons and Maximals. The alien beings known as the Vok launched a quantum destabilizer capable of obliterating the planet, while Optimus Primal led the mission to stop it. Dinobot's contribution was no less critical. He held the line, strategized, defended his comrades when chaos reigned. The weapon was destroyed, but not without cost. Optimus Primal was lost in the explosion, and Dinobot, for the first time, stood on the edge of leadership. He never sought command, but in the coming of the Fusors, with Primal believed dead and the Maximals thrown in disarray, Dinobot helped coordinate their defense. His leadership wasn't sentimental, it was pragmatic. Ruthless at times, but it worked. He issued orders, analyzed risks, and refused to be paralyzed by grief. And when Optimus returned, resurrected through Rhinox's daring gamble, Dinobot relinquished control without protest, not because he doubted his own strength, but because honor demanded it. Still, unease lingered. His meditations with the Rhinox grew longer. His sparring with Rattrap, sharper. Theirs was not friendship, it was friction. Rattrap questioned everything. Dinobot answered with blade and principle. In episodes like A Better Mousetrap and The Low Road, their clashes revealed something deeper, a philosophical conflict. Rattrap embodied survivalism. Dinobot embodied idealism. And slowly, perhaps unintentionally, Dinobot taught the Maximals something they've forgotten. The war isn't just won with strategy, it's won with principle. But the cost of that principle is rising. He became increasingly obsessed with the golden disc, the artifact Megatron had stolen. Once dismissed, now haunted his thoughts. It wasn't just data, it was prophecy, a record of time, and a blueprint to break it. Dinobot hadn't yet reclaimed the disc, but he watched, studied, and began to see the terrifying implications. The disc contained coordinates, historical inflection points, plans for extermination. If Megatron succeeded, humanity would be wiped out. The Autobots would never rise. The future Dinobot barely dared believe in would vanish. Cybertron would fall before it ever truly lived. But Dinobot didn't act. Not yet. He couldn't. His code demanded something more than outrage. It demanded evidence. So he waited, calculated, prepared. He fought beside the Maximals, trained alongside them, ate with them, bled for them, but never quite became one of them because he couldn't afford to belong. And the weight of that isolation forced Dinobot to make a decision to defect that would also not bring him peace. It placed him in exile. Among the Maximals, he was never truly trusted. Among the Predacons, he was branded a traitor. Caught between two sides, he became something rarer than an enemy. He became a question, one that both sides were afraid to answer. What do you do with a warrior who listens to his conscience? Throughout the Beast Wars, Dinobot clashed repeatedly with both allies and enemies. His rigid code of honor clashed with Primal's compassion, Rattrap's pragmatism, and Megatron's ruthlessness. He wasn't a team player, he was a blade, sharpened, restless, and pointed at the heart of hypocrisy. But perhaps nowhere is this conflict more vivid than the episode Maximal No More. In it, Dinobot attempts to rejoin the Predacons, not out of loyalty, but out of despair. Frustrated by the Maximal's indecision and disillusioned with his own place in the war, he seeks purpose in the one place he once rejected. It's not a twist, it's a tragedy. Because when he's welcomed back, it's not as a comrade, it's as a pawn. Megatron manipulates him, using flattery and false brotherhood to test his loyalty. And for a moment, Dinobot wavers. But when he sees what Megatron is truly after, innocent lives erased without remorse, his conviction reignites. And in that moment, Dinobot doesn't just reject the Predacons, he rejects the manipulation of his identity. He isn't theirs, he isn't the Maximals, he is his own warrior, bound to a code older than factions and deeper than order. This is what makes Dinobot powerful, not his strength, but his clarity. He knows who he is, even when no one else does. And that identity, that self-forged morality, becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Not as a Maximal, not as a Predacon, but as something else entirely. A warrior with no banner, a soldier bound only by truth. And as the shadows deepened and the prophecy grew clearer, Dinobot stood alone, preparing for a battle none of them could see coming. Because the war was never just about territory or survival. It was about time, and time was running out. Before we continue with the tale of Dinobot, make sure to hit follow or subscribe on your podcast app if you're enjoying this episode. New episodes of Disassembled, Heroes and Villains drop every week. Don't miss our next deep dive on Soundwave coming next Thursday. Now, back to the story of a hero and his largest sacrifice yet. As new enemies emerged and old wounds reopened, Dinobot stood at the precipice of the greatest choice of his life. The Maximals still didn't trust him, the Predacons wanted him dead. But Dinobot no longer sought their approval, he sought justice. And as the shadow of destiny grew larger, Dinobot would have to decide, would he follow his code to the bitter end, even if it killed him? The warning signs were there. A warrior who no longer slept. A blade that never left his hand. He had always stood apart. But now, even the distance had distance. Dinobot no longer trained with the Maximals. He no longer debated Rattrap or meditated with Rhinox. He simply watched, listened, calculated. Something was coming. Something only he seemed to understand. And when it came, he knew no one would be ready. Because some destinies don't announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive quietly, like a shadow at noon, and when they fall upon you, there's no one left to hear the warning, except the one who must act, alone. It began not with a battle, but with a realization. In the Beast Wars episode Code of Hero, Dinobot discovered that Megatron had found the Valley of the Apes, a cradle of early human life, and in his hands was the golden disc. With it in his armies, Megatron could wipe out humanity's ancestors. erasing a species that, in time, would give rise to the Autobots' greatest ally on a foreign world. These weren't casualties of war. This was an extinction event orchestrated by a lunatic, and no one else saw it. No one else could stop it in time, so Dinobot made a choice. He didn't warn Optimus, he didn't tell Rhinox, he didn't ask for help, because some battles aren't about survival, they're about the outcome. He flew to the valley alone, just one warrior against a battalion. He knew he wouldn't walk away. The Predacons were already in place. Megatron stood above the valley, the golden disc in its claws, preparing to strike the humans below. Waspinator, Quickstrike, Inferno, all armed, all merciless. But none of them were ready for what came next. Dinobot struck like a fury. He dismantled Waspinator with a single blow, outmaneuvered Quickstrike, outwitted Inferno, and when his weapons failed, when his energy reserves were drained and his own body began to falter, he didn't stop. He used the terrain, he used debris, he used a sharpened stick, and finally, his bare hands. He became the very definition of resolve. The battle was brutal, exhausting, costly, but in the end, it was Dinobot who stood tall, barely, shattered, smoking, sinking to one knee, and with his last bit of energy, he obliterated the golden disc, taking his last breath, but remaining victorious, shattered, smoking, sinking to one knee. He destroyed the golden disc with his last bit of energy, victorious, but on the brink of death. Megatron fled, his golden disc damaged beyond repair. The timeline had been preserved, humanity would survive, the future would unfold, and Dinobot collapsed beneath the rising sun. The Maximals arrived too late. They found him broken, spark fading, but he didn't ask for comfort. He asked for glory. He asked only to know had he done the right thing. Optimus Primal gave him the truth, yes. And as his spark extinguished, Dinobot left behind more than a wrecked body. He left a legacy written not in orders he followed or the battles he won, but a legacy of growth, of challenging one's own beliefs, and of sacrifice. Rattrap, who had never trusted him, stood silent beside his grave. Optimus Primal said it plainly. He was a warrior and a hero. Let the battle be recorded in the annals of history. Let no one forget the name Dinobot. And in a quiet, unmarked corner of prehistoric Earth, the soul of Beast Wars was laid to rest, not as a Maximal, not as a Predacon, but as a warrior who chose to believe that honor still had a place in a dishonorable world, and when the time came to act, he acted. But legacies are strange things. You can bury a warrior, you can mourn a hero, but some sparks don't stay gone. From the shadows of death, something familiar and deeply wrong began to stir. In death, Dinobot had found peace, but the war was not finished with him. Megatron, ever the strategist, saw more than a fallen soldier. He saw a weapon unfinished. With a piece of Rampage's clone spark and advanced transmetal technology, he created a new warrior, Dinobot 2. But this was no resurrection. This was desecration. Gone was the code of honor, the sharp clarity of conviction. In its place stood a creature of ruthless efficiency and loyalty without principle. A twisted mockery of the original, Dinobot in name, in form, but not in soul. From the moment he was activated in feral scream, Dinobot 2 was everything his predecessor was not: cold, precise, unhesitating. He obeyed Megatron without question, more beast than warrior. He referred to himself in the third person. He growled instead of spoke, and yet, he was devastatingly effective. He hunted like a raptor, fought like a machine. He terrified the Maximals, not just because he was deadly, but because he wore the face of a fallen friend. Rattrap, especially, recoiled. This wasn't Dinobot. This was a predator wearing his skin, and Megatron reveled in it. With half of Rampage's spark bound inside him, Dinobot 2 was functionally immortal, and his loyalty seemed absolute. Megatron had not just created a soldier, he had created a shadow, a walking reminder that nothing, no spark, no memory, no legacy, was sacred in this war, but cracks began to show. Rampage, forever defiant, taunted Dinobot 2, and Master Blaster, he spat venom with every word. Rampage could sense the hollowness, the absence of something deeper. It wasn't that Dinobot 2 lacked a spark, it was that he lacked a soul. Over time, Dinobot 2 grew more self-aware. He didn't regain memories, he wasn't the original, but he began to question. Why did he hesitate before a kill? Why did he stare too long at the sky? Why did something stir quietly, painfully, when he looked into his reflection? The turning point came in Nemesis Part 2. Megatron, now commanding the resurrected Decepticon warship Nemesis, was on the brink of rewriting history. The Maximals were outgunned, outmatched, and Megatron, drunk on power, turned the ship's fusion cannons towards the Ark. the vessel carrying the dormant forms of Optimus Prime and the original Autobots. Destroy the Ark, and the future itself would be rewritten. Dinobot 2 stood by his side, ready, efficient, but not blind. He turned his gaze to the Maximal, to Optimus Primal, battered, defiant, a leader who inspired loyalty, not demanded it, who ruled through conviction, not fear, and something awakened. He didn't remember the past, but he understood its meaning. The cannon charged, the moment arrived, and Dinobot 2 acted. He turned on Megatron. In one decisive motion, he severed the power relay and attacked his creator. The explosion engulfed him, tearing through the warship, and as he died, his final words cut through the silence. I have my honor. Just 4 words, but they meant everything. Dinobot 2 died not as a clone, not as a weapon, but as something else. A will, a choice. He did what the original Dinobot had done before him. Choose the future over the present, honor over programming, sacrifice over survival. It wasn't redemption, he had no past to redeem, but it was meaning. He died not as a replica, but as a reflection of the warrior who came before him, cracked, imperfect, but unmistakably clear. And in doing so, he became something rare in the Transformers mythos, a clone who forged his own legacy. When Dinobot 2 fell, the war didn't stop, but something else did. Megatron's grip on fate. Because twice now, a warrior bearing Dinobot's name had chosen death, not for conquest, but for conviction. Not to rewrite history, but to preserve it. He was gone, but his choice, the clarity behind it, echoed louder than any explosion, because in a world ruled by power, Dinobot proved something no weapon ever could. That character still matters. Dinobot's legacy in Transformers is unlike any other. He began as a traitor, lived as a soldier, and died, twice, as something far more rare. A free spirit with a moral code. In Code of Hero, he didn't die for glory. He didn't die because the plot needed a twist. He died because no one else would. Because honor demanded it. That's what made it powerful. And that's why his sacrifice is still cited, not just as a franchise high point, but as a benchmark for storytelling across science fiction. Because Dinobot teaches us something that many heroes don't. That morality isn't about winning. It's about choosing what's right, even when the cost is everything. He reminds us that real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall when your fear is screaming at you to run. That honor isn't a code etched into law. It's a quiet decision made when facing a world marred by darkness. He's not just a warrior. He's a mirror. Across fandoms, echoes of Dinobot appear again and again. Like Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, he began his journey filled with bitterness and shame, desperately seeking his father's approval. Like Dinobot, he started on the wrong side, not out of cruelty, but out of confusion and upbringing. But through pain, humility, and hard choices, Zuko broke free. He chose his own destiny, and like Dinobot, he wasn't given trust freely, he earned it every step of the way. Similar to Dragon Ball Z's Vegeta, Dinobot represents another kind of pride, the kind that burns, the kind that isolates. Vegeta saw weakness and compassion until he didn't. His sacrifice against Majin Buu didn't erase his past, it revealed the change within. He didn't die to be a hero, he died to protect what mattered, and when the moment came, pride didn't stop him, it empowered him. Much like the Hound from Game of Thrones, Dinobot was a killer by training, a survivor by instinct. He mocked faith, mercy, and honor until those very ideals began to haunt him. The Hound didn't change overnight, but when it mattered, when someone had to stand against cruelty, he stood. Both teach us that cynicism is not strength, that the world can break you, and still, you can choose decency. And perhaps one of the most unexpected yet profound mirrors to Dinobot is Samurai Jack. Cast from time, Jack is a warrior adrift, stranded in a world ruled by cruelty, absurdity, and moral decay. Like Dinobot, he walks alone more often than not. He is constantly tempted by despair, futility, and the ease of surrender. And like Dinobot, he never stops fighting. Jack doesn't win every battle. He doesn't always have hope. But what he does have, always, is his code. He refuses to become the thing he's trying to destroy, even when no one remembers, even when the world laughs at the very idea of honor. In this, Jack and Dinobot are kindred spirits. They are warriors, not because they crave violence, but because they believe some things are still worth protecting. Children, innocence, the future. Jack once said, "The decisions you make and the actions that follow are a reflection of who you are." Dinobot would understand that, because in the end, neither of them were trying to win the war. They were trying to deserve the victory. And perhaps even the most iconic comparison, Darth Vader, or rather Anakin Skywalker, is Dinobot 2's darkest mirror. Both began as warriors turned tools. Both lost their identities, and both, in the end, reclaim something buried. Vader turns in Return of the Jedi, and Dinobot 2's Rebellion and Nemesis are moments where programming gives way to principle, where the ghosts of the man break through the monster. All of these characters have one thing in common. They took the harder path. They looked at power and stepped away. They looked at certainty and chose doubt. They looked at evil and said no. Not because it was easy, not because they were guaranteed success, because they couldn't live with who they would become if they didn't. We are not our past. We are not what we choose to protect when no one else is watching. Whether you're a soldier in war, a voice in a crowd, or just someone navigating the quiet battles of life, Dinobot's story reminds you that it's your choices, not your victories, that define you. You don't need to be loved. You just need to be brave, even if no one stands with you. In a war of beasts and machines, Dinobot wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the smartest, but he was the most honorable. He questioned, he doubted, he failed. And still, he chose to rise, to fight, to fall with purpose. He died twice. Once as a warrior with nothing left to prove, and again as a clone who had finally discovered what made life worth living. And in doing so, he left behind more than wreckage. He left behind a standard. So when you face your next hard choice, when the easy path feels tempting and the right path feels lonely, ask yourself, what would Dinobot do? Then do the harder thing. Do the honorable thing. Stay brave and stay handsome. And if Dinobot meant something to you, drop a comment, share this episode, or tag us. We're building something here together. And remember, a warrior does not let his fear control him. He strikes when he must. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay handsome.